Well, without further ado, I'd like to welcome everyone in. Thank you for joining us today to a Skill Up Consensus Search. Smarter, not harder. My name is Dr. Galveo. I will be one of your co-hosts, along with my colleague, Stephanie Johnson, a fabulous librarian. Our consensus search, smarter, not harder. Skill Up today, it'll be with Larraby Fellows. I appreciate you very much, Larraby. Without further ado, take the floor. Thank you. Actually, before I forget, I do apologize. One second. Before we move on, I'd like to do some housekeeping. If you could please go on, and if you have any questions, use our Q&A for your questions. That keeps us grounded and know that the questions are being answered in the order which it was received. Thank you again. Now I'll pass it on to Larrabee Fellows. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. And this is a really exciting new tool. So I'm Larraby Fellows. I'm one of the reference and instruction librarians at NU. And my background is mostly in history, social sciences, and the arts. So I'm the liaison for SOLs as well as the SCOE programs for a few of them for education. So we're going to start with a basic, oops, there we go, definition of what consensus is. And as as all of these tools develop, librarians are right at the forefront trying to learn how all of these work so that we can maximize them and teach them for our students. So this is still a very new product, and I will say that it's still sort of in a not a trial phase, but we're still kind of in beta mode, I would call it. So what is Consensus? It is an academic search engine that uses AI to search um, not just the materials that are available in the scholarly fields in the library, but it also can find open access content. So it's not searching the open web, but it is searching repositories of academic content that are openly available. We used to call this the deep web sometimes because it's sort of the hard to find stuff that isn't stuff that you might find in an immediate Google search. And so it also combines what we are used to with keyword searching and Boolean with a more natural language search so that scholars can actually have a conversation with the tool and be guided around the research, get some context around the research, and basically just start a little bit further in than if they were starting cold and just beginning with no background or no information about their research topic. So this can be very helpful, especially as a discovery tool, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The nice thing is that it highlights the high quality open access papers and articles, like I said, that you might not find in a regular Google or Google Scholar search, but it also connects you to the library's article databases. So it's a very powerful tool. So we recommend, of course, using it with the library's navigator search and using it sort of as a discovery tool. And you'll see more about that as we do our little demo. And so you can see that when you're starting with the navigator search, you have a very comprehensive, if you think of the mountain as all of the information, you're getting a very comprehensive view of all the information. And with the consensus route, you're kind of jumping in and you're able to bypass some of the um, those basic, like, how do I search? What words do I search? Like, where do I go? Some of those more complicated questions that students often struggle with, the tools and consensus just make it easier to jump further. It doesn't mean there's less mountain to cover, but it means that you're put at a different place. So that's the way I like to see it. Both paths lead to full text articles, and like I said, most of the library tools that we have right now are incorporating AI uh, research assistance as well. So you'll be seeing more and more of this. To get started, you can just go directly to the consensus site. It's consensus.app. And you'll be prompted to log in. You should use your institutional login information and find NU. And that will help you find full text when it's available in our collection. And so The nice thing about this, and I'll do a little bit of a demo in a little bit, is that you can ask it questions. So rather than having to break down your topic into concepts or specific keywords, you can use clear language. You can say, I'm an undergraduate student researching this. Where should I start? You can actually have a conversation with the tool. And some of the tips that we encourage to maximize your prompting of this tool are to think about population, think about the intervention and exposure, how much of the population and how much of the studied the subject is um, exposed to various variables, the outcome and the time frame. So in addition, so you can see that like evening social media use, so that's time frame evening, reduced sleep quality among adolescents, that's population, and reduced sleep quality is the outcome. So we're thinking all about like all of those elements, and you can, as you're using this tool, it will prompt some really helpful questions that students might not think to ask. There are a couple of different search modes. There is a sort of straight paper search, and that helps you just go through and find all the relevant papers that might be there on your topic. And then there's also a deep search, which is a review. So if you're going to go further into the methodology and you want to ask questions about how was this study conducted compared to this study and why, what was the differences in these two control groups? If you want to really get into the nuances of the methodology and the research, you can use a deep search option. And there are also some really helpful tools. There's the pro analysis, which also basically summarizes the top papers. So when you're looking for some of the foundational research and the research that you're going to be looking for, especially when you're doing a literature review, when you're looking for that, those foundational articles, that's a nice way of doing that. And there's also there are also filters that will help you filter by type of article and methodology. So, like I said, it's very robust. There are lots of different ways to use it. And like I said, you want to look through, and as you're scanning and collecting, it makes it very easy to collect a lot of articles because you're finding a lot. So hopefully this will address that I can't find anything issue, but that also means you may find quite a lot. That means that instead of reading everything, you want to break it down. You want to look to see if the methodology is appropriate for your research. Look at the population. Look at the publication, of course. Make sure that it's recent, and then, of course, you click through and get to the full text, which I'll show you. So this is kind of the pathway that I would see a scholar using. You could start in consensus. So this is a sort of workflow. You can start in consensus, get some ideas about the scope of your research, have a conversation with the AI about how much you might want to include, what methodology might be most appropriate, get a summary of research that's been done in your area, and then start to collect the full text. And so some of that you may get in consensus, some of that you may need to find directly in the databases, and it all helps you connect with all those resources, which you can then export into Zotero, and then I make it sound so easy, right? But it's all done. And so it connects, it's part of this sort of chain of research. And as I mentioned, it's a really nice discovery tool. So before we do this hands-on activity, I am going to do a search. And when you go to the Consensus app, you'll see a basic search box. You'll also see the examples of how the different types of searching. So you can search everything. You can search, there is a medical feature. So if you're doing a medical topic, that's helpful because sometimes the medical subject headings are different. And so it's just a sort of different terminology. For example, you would be using like neoplasms instead of cancer as a search term. And then you also have the option to save things to your library, just like you do in the Navigator search. And one of the things that we're still, did someone have a
Here.
question?
No, I got it taken care of, Larry. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thanks. No problem. So if you're used to that in our Navigator search, same thing in the consensus search, they're not connected yet. And so that I was talking about this with some colleagues about how to maximize that. But basically, that's the reason we have Zotero is that you can put everything in Zotero and it is there in your citation management software. So all of these tools are really exciting. I'm going to do a search to, let's see. I want to write, this is the best way to experience this, a paper about wearable technology in the United States. And what I might do, ethical impacts, wearable technology, I'm going to put for women in the United States. So you can see I'm thinking about those elements. I'm doing a little bit of pre-thinking. I'm able to put in a specific population there, a specific location, and some of the measurables there. But if I didn't know any of that and I just said I want to write a paper about wearable technology, it will still go through this with you. So let's run a search here, and you can see that what it's going to do in the first section, you'll see that there is this pro section here. Those are the sort of starting resources that if you just want to get, right to the sources, you can jump right to those. But this is what's really interesting is it's going to give a summary of the topic with citations included. And all of these are coming from the library and from the very credible open access repositories that are available. And so you can see that if you wanted to follow up with this particular source, you just hover over the citation, the in-text citation, and then you have the option to click out to NU and the PDF. And this is where you may be asked to log in again, or you may be asked to prove that you're human. And then you go right, and there's the full text. So it makes things a little bit easier because students and searchers are connected directly to the full text. Um, the other thing I wanted to point out was that you can create little projects. So I went ahead before this session and I created a project that was all about this topic, and I was able to create in my library. I have a couple of different topics here. Here we go. And so within my library, I've been able to do folders. So this is really, really helpful when you've got multiple classes, multiple assignments. And just like with other tools, you can create folders and organize sources that way. So here are all my articles about wearable tech. And this is where it gets really interesting is that you can ask it to summarize the methodology of these papers and describe the gaps. So this is another thing that I know scholars are looking for is where are those gaps in the scholarship where we could, delve in and discover a topic that hasn't been explored. And so I'll go through it. It'll churn through its thing. And so you can see that it's reading through the papers. And that may not have been like the best. That may not have been the best example, but it's really an interesting thing to be able to have a conversation with the AI about these tools. And again, this is not going out on the web. This is a sort of contained, sort of safe space for AI. It's using the repositories, the open access repositories, as well as library databases and all of the indexes that we have. So you can be pretty confident that you're going to be encountering credible information. I like to think of this almost as like if Wikipedia went to college, that it has a lot of that capability. And so if you find something you wanted um, to get to, you can just click out to the PDF right there. And it just makes discovering content that much easier. Same tools that are available in that Navigator search. You have the save, you have the citation tools, which are built in and will give an APA citation, as well as the link if you want to get back to the specific document, as well as the download button. So that's the basics. And beyond that, I'm going to start a new thread. You can also have conversations about different methodologies. Actually, here. All right. So if I wanted to, um, what approach would be more effective to study wearable technology and privacy? Quantitative, I can't spell quantitative. There you go. You don't even actually have to spell properly. No. There we go. Um, Here we go. So it's going to suggest a mixed methods design, which is really interesting. You can also, okay. You can also direct it and prompt it to specifically look for papers of a specific methodology. And I know this is something that comes up a lot with students because they're looking for examples of, or anybody, searchers and scholars, they're looking for examples of the type of methodology that they're going to be using and need examples for the literature review. And so it can be used to really break down different types of research and give examples as well. So it's not just the content, but it's examples. Um, and like I said, these are all materials that are either coming from the library or they're coming from the high quality open access repositories like the Directory of Open Access Journals and ERIC and other large repositories. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. I'm going to check the chat for questions here.
Nothing in the QA yet and
Okay,
nothing
great.
in the chat for you.
All right. So at this point, well, people are trickling back in. I think what I'd love to do is go around and if anyone wants to volunteer to report out from their group, or if you have specific questions that came up while you were searching, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'd
Yeah,
love
I
to
got
hear.
one that we couldn't figure out. Right? We
Mm,
got in and we did searches and we found articles in that. There's when you click on the article, you get a reading pane to the right, and then that
hmm
reading pane it gives you sort of the abstract for the article and then a
Right.
score, and then to the right of that there's citations. I'm assuming that's the number of times that article was cited, and then
hmm
just to the right of that there's an influence score. And it's
Let's see.
what does that represent? I couldn't figure out if the higher numbers were more influential or less influential.
Let me get to an example so that I can see. I'll just go into one of my. So yeah, this reading pane that kind of slides across is something that will come. It automatically will give you that list of resources. What I've been doing is closing it right away to just to see the overview, and then going back and looking at it when I want to like download things and look through specific
Yeah, see where it says you
materials.
say it
Yeah.
says citations, number of citations. Mine looks a little
Mhm.
different because I'm on Mac,
Sure.
but on my pane, right next to the citations, it has an influence score.
Let's see. Okay. Let's see if I can find one. It does break things down into types of article, which I find really helpful. I'm trying to find one that has an influence score as well. So you can see that Here's one with supporting quotes. Is it this one? It describes what type of study it is, which I think is really helpful. I'm not seeing one. Can you share, let's see, can you share the
Excuse me,
link?
Larraby. I was
Yeah.
working with Ray. This is Lisa.
Yeah.
If you open it up and you get to the screen where you find overview, snapshot,
Oh, right.
evidence,
Here we go.
right.
Yeah.
And if you
There we go.
scroll there down on that side, it should be right under the title. It
Okay.
is right under the title at the top. It gives you a SJR score and then citations and then an influential and yours does not have that. So maybe it's
It might not be for I mean, every source is going to have different, it's going to come with different metadata.
okay.
Every journal has different things to offer. So I
So
hadn't come across that before.
I'm reading about the influence score right now. So
Mm,
it seems that it's about like a consensus meter. So if you're asking more direct yes or no questions, it will it will populate its sources with a consensus meter score.
I see. Okay, so it
And
has to do with the way the questions are being asked. I
Yeah.
hadn't come up with that. I hadn't actually encountered that before.
And
So,
Larraby, actually, Laura went ahead and put into the chat. She said a consensus influence score can refer to multiple distinct metrics depending on your field of study. It
mhm.
generally measures how much a group or a system's participants agree with a verdict or how much an individual's opinion or presence sways a broader network. And then Megan put in there, there's a breakdown of the SJR quartiles as well.
Mhm.
Um, so they've got Q1, which is the top 25%. These are the most highly cited and prestigious journals in a given field. Q2, which is the 26th to the 50th, solid
Mhm.
visibility and a competitive, thorough peer review process. Q3, which is going to be 51st to 75%. It's moderate impact and above average citation. And Q4 will be the bottom 25%. So
Right.
journals with lower impact, though they still meet the baseline criteria for being indexed.
Thank you. And yeah, here's an example of where it says the influential score is 8 citations. It's been cited by 70 other studies, and then it's got the Q1 score right there.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
does.
I was just
Oh,
curious as to what influential meant. I get the Scopus score and the number of citations. That other one threw me for a loop. I didn't understand what that was.
I think that's like sort of the way consensus is marketing its tool is like how, the consensus. What's the consensus in this field about the research? So I think that's sort of like it's trying to do some sort of um, social and grading system of how much the research has influenced other research in that field. Um, so yeah, that's a great question. Does anybody else have other questions or anything else to come up? What else came up? Let's see if I'm going to check the chat here. And thank you, Megan and Laura, for adding that in there. Anybody else from a different group?
Our group just kind of talked a little bit more about the database. So getting people signed in to make sure that they were able to get into the account okay. And just kind of seeing what the different filters were and talking about what they meant.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the filters, we're thinking about like comparing. It's really not a comparative thing to Navigator search. It's really apples and oranges, so it's hard to really do a comparison. But were there things that were new or unusual that you discovered about consensus that you haven't come across before? Specific ways of filtering?
Well, I think one of them would be that the journal thing. So like if you scroll, like if you come to that and just click on filter, we just kind of went through and talked about those. So just that idea of, I mean, just like Navigator search, you can navigate by years, but
Mhm.
the year range is just going to be different than what you see in Navigator search. Like they offer a 2 year, and that's not a default in Navigator. But just like Navigator, you can set a custom date range. So
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
still doing good. And a really great thing about this is the ability to set a sample size. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that's a tool our doctoral students are going to love. I would have loved a sample size filter. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
That'll make it much easier for people to hunt for that kind of stuff. Um, and then we just talked about preprints and whether or not you can cite them. And
Mm.
so I just said you may want to check with your instructor before using a preprint, the advantages to looking and reading through them versus the disadvantages. And then to reach out to the ASC if you have any questions about how to cite one.
Great, excellent. And as I was scrolling through, I noticed the human animal marker, and I know that's something that is constantly frustrating. I've worked with so many students who find the perfect research article, but it's about mice. It's always about mice. And so finding, especially when it comes to biological medical information that involves humans, I think that's another really great limiter. So if you haven't played around with some of these limiters, there's a lot to discover, and that's kind of why we're all discovering it together. So, any other questions or observations or concerns? I'll throw it out there in terms of concerns. If faculty, if you're teaching, how do you see your students using this, and how do you see your teaching having to evolve because they're able to get to this kind of stuff faster, if that's on the table, or how might assignments evolve?
Well, I think one of the things that I found that was very useful is the ability to create folders,
Hmm.
and um, that could really influence how I uh, help students with things like literature review, because it's sort of when you can do that, it sort of obviates the need for you know more formal annotated bibliographies.
Hmm.
So I think that could be very useful.
And I would think also because you can share library, you can share a library with somebody. This could be a helpful tool in terms of instructors reviewing what students have found in a more dynamic way, so that you could sort of be sharing the same search in real time. And that really opens up lots of possibilities for teaching and for integrating materials and for assignment building as well. Yeah. Anybody else? And if not, we are 15, I can give you back 15 minutes of your day.
I do have one question. So the students have access to this. Has there been any training for students on this thing?
That's what we're developing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
That's
All
what
right.
this
Yeah.
is a part of. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we're
I just
developing.
I don't
So
want to turn my mob loose
yeah,
on something that they haven't had
absolutely.
any training for.
Absolutely. And this is a great time for me to promote our AI guide under Learn on the library website. You can click on artificial intelligence. I'll put this in the chat so you can look through it. We have a whole section on using consensus for research. Um, and a brand new, hot off the presses video from Megan, um, which there's the link right there. Um, which goes through, it has the instructions. So if you wanted to use this with your students, you can link to this page. We're still developing materials. There is a tremendous amount of material on the consensus website itself as well. So I would encourage you to play around with that because oops, I don't know why that's doing that. They have a huge library of videos, and their YouTube channel is very robust. So if it's something that you want to encourage your students to use, or if you want to introduce in your class, please get in touch with us, and we'll kind of customize that for you if you're thinking of using it.
Yeah, I think, at some level we should have that discussion with the folks that design courses earlier in programs.
Yeah,
Because
I
by the
agree.
time they get to me in dissertation, it's sort of they've missed the boat, I think, being able to classify and organize their stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to get more library and information literacy instruction baked into the courses. Any other questions or comments? It's a really exciting tool. And as I said, we'll be unveiling some new AI tools that are part of the Navigator search as well. It will have a similar, as far as I can tell, it will have a similar functionality. One of the tools will help students summarize and examine material within the specific articles themselves. So there's like a sort of intra-article AI lens, and there, in theory, there will be also this kind of research assistant AI using, I think it's Perplexity is using the Perplexity engine. So you'll be able to kind of experiment with that in Navigator search very soon as well. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm all wrapped up, and I will stop sharing my screen.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming today. We do want to let you know you will be receiving an email from us with the recording. So if you want to go back and look at anything. Also, Larraby, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and drop your email into the chat. And that way, if anybody has any questions, they can reach out directly to Larraby and she'll be able to answer your questions.
Absolutely.
All right.
Please, yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.